when Israelis look around the globe and see all the threats that face us, the one comfort that we have in the greatest of all democracies, which is friendly to us, which understands our conditions and responds to many of our needs. And the amount of appreciation that you will find towards the United States in Israel, I think, is unprecedented anywhere else in the world. And there are very just reasons for that. I think you deserve that appreciation very much. And that's why we are also following very, very closely everything that is happening here, because it has so much consequence to our own condition.
Let me get to another mega question. You live in a very hot area of the world. I just got back from Arizona, and it's true that you get out in that sun and you can feel that you can barely think.
Yes.
Is there any possibility that there's a relationship between the human brain and temperature that affects the way problems are perceived?
Well, on the way here to the studio, I discussed it with the lady who brought me. First of all, I don't know of any serious quantitative research on this, so I cannot quote any credible sources. But as somebody living there, I'm quite confident that there is a major difference in your ability, particularly to concentrate, to focus. If the thinking requires some permanence, some duration of focusing, it's very, very difficult when it's very hot and very humid, as you experience here also sometimes, like today, for instance, in Washington. Israel is now almost fully air-conditioned, like the U.S. So unless you really look for it outside, you are quite protected from it. But I had also experiences. I often go to Africa, which I love immensely. And I have seen very often that as you reach the higher elevations, you see major differences in the behavior of people and in their energy levels of energy, and many, many other aspects, including education and so on.
At the higher elevations, are mental faculties sharper or duller?
Yes. No, sharper.
I'm just trying to think of a theory to explain this, an equatorial theory of political influence and revolution. And it seems that South America, the Middle East, all around the equator and in the tropic zones have more political unrest than the placid Danes or Finns or Norwegians, for example. I'll have to work on that theory myself.
All right. That's a lifetime job,
I guess. Let's go to your new job, which is MindFit and the CogniFit. Explain how you got involved in this.
Yeah, gladly. I was, many years ago, it was actually 1983, 25 years ago exactly. I was here in this area in Washington for 2 years as a visiting scientist at NIH. And at that time, the new brain imaging techniques started to evolve, particularly the PET scan at that time. And that technique assumes that if you inject a radioactive marker into the blood, it travels with the blood anywhere that the blood goes, including the brain. And then at some point, when you challenge that person's brain by asking some questions and so on, or giving a special task, you can see which parts of the brain light up, that means have higher concentration of the radioactive material, when the person is, let's say, thinking about the answer to that question, which became a wonderful tool in much of brain research, particularly neuroscience, of course. Since then, there are other techniques, but that was the beginning. And it struck me that in order for this technique to work, it actually assumes that those cells that are active get more blood supply. Otherwise, they wouldn't have higher concentration of radioactive material. And blood supply for neurons in the brain are everything they need. This is the best thing that can happen to them, to have more blood supply. That means fresh oxygen. That means all the nutrients that the bloodstream carries with it. So 25 years ago, I started to think about it. Well, this is interesting because something similar happens in the physical, in other parts of the body. When you activate a muscle, it stays in better shape. There is a better blood supply, and there are other reasons why this happens. So I started to talk about this with some of my colleagues at NIH, and they told me invariably, I must say, that you are probably right, but it's too early for us to be able to prove it. And in fact, it was 25 years ago. So I opened a folder, so to speak, and put some of these thoughts and ideas into this folder. And whenever I came across another thought or another study which seemed to relate to this, I would just stick it into this folder. And the folder became thicker and thicker, and the years went by, and things started to change. Both the research had major advances, which in fact proved not just this point about blood supply, but many other ways by which the brain, which is challenged, stays in better shape than a brain that is allowed to stay lazy for too long. At the same time, there were also some technological changes. Like when I first thought about elderly people practicing on their brains, training their brains on a home computer, it was 25 years ago a pretty strange thought, I would say, because there were no home computers. It just started with Apple II, and it was just really the beginning of it all. Mm-hmm. But now it's a common thing, really, fortunately. So what's happened that both the research and the technology came closer to my folder. So 9 years ago, I thought that the time has come really to try to put this notion into some practical application to make the lives of elderly people, healthy elderly people, better than they could be. Because the head is everything. Once the head is not working properly, the rest becomes irrelevant.
I was curious at what point in your folder development
yes.
did the reinforcing research emerge that, unlike the common conception years ago that the human brain had a certain age at which it stopped growing and stopped reacting, we found out that was not true, that you could still fire up the system and still learn new things. And I wondered how that fit into your system, because it must have made you say, aha, I was right all along, right?
I was very happy when I learned about the research which started in Sweden, actually, and then in other places, about regeneration of new cells in the brain, which, as you rightly pointed out, was against everything that all the textbooks. I was teaching this stuff to students for years, and we always believed that after the age of 2, that's it. That's what we have. It has to stay with us as long as we can and make the most of it. But there would be no new reinforcement on that account. So that was fantastic, really, to discover. But it was rather late. That was very close already to the opening of the folder. There were other inventions discoveries that were made before, which were also very, very useful and fascinating. And they all point in the same direction, which is very fortunate.
Our guest is Dr. Shlomo Breznitz, as we've mentioned several times. He's a former academic, college professor, member of the Knesset, and now we're focusing on his company called Cognifit and its MindFit programming, which I took a demo version of. Cognifit is the generic URL, right? Cognifit.
Yes.
That's COGNIFIT.com. It is com, right?
Yes.
Yes. The MindFit program is not only designed to maintain but to improve mental abilities.
Yes.
And what I was fascinated to look at, even in the demo, the limited demo that I saw, was how did you figure out which of the spatial relations that the exercises are based on? They're not text-based, which obviously they couldn't be, or you'd have the literacy factor. How did you discover which one of them actually worked and which of them were cute, perhaps, but really didn't apply to your main principle?
Yes. Well, there are two answers to your question. First of all, I would preface it by saying that anything you do helps. Anything new that you do is much better than not doing anything at all. So it is very difficult to go entirely wrong and develop a task which has practically no value. Very difficult to do so. And I want to say that even the simple computer games and video games that you find around in abundance do certain good things. There is no question about it, and it has been shown actually that they engage the brain in certain higher speed to process information, which is very important, and to respond fast, quickly, and also to be more alert to the visual scene, and so on and so forth. So things typically work rather than not work. But then the second answer, which is more serious perhaps, is that we have a very, very huge database. Everything that a person that is using our software happens anywhere in the world goes to our database, which is fully anonymous, so we have no idea who this person is, and we even don't want to know. But we want to learn from it about what is working, as you said, and what is working less. And it is through the analysis of the database that we can always make our products better and better.
One of the principles of video games at any level is you have to get to the new level. Kids have secrets for getting which rock you have to touch in which order to find the key to, that, yes. Getting to level 5. In trying your program, I was laughing at first because I was doing so miserably, but I was stunned at how much better I was the second time around.
Yes.
That when I learned what I had to do, for example, let me give our audience a visual example. You have a square, and it's each of the 4 sides is bisected into halves of 2 different colors. So around the square, you have 8 different colors. Inside the box is a ball of one of those colors. Much like the game Pong, an early computer game, the ball starts moving toward the side, and you see where it's going. If its direction doesn't match the color of the ball, you have to click until where it's going does match the ball. Then the ball bounces, and you keep going. Terrific, relatively quick. Then, you devil, you put in a second box with a second ball, and you've got to keep both balls moving.
Yes.
Is there in MindFit program an endpoint at which you reach level 7 and that game you can't do anymore?
No, because the whole point of the program is to optimize the level of challenge. You see, with effective training of the brain, there are 2 problems that you want to avoid at all costs. One is the problem of boredom. Mm-hmm. Things are too easy, not challenging enough, then you just leave it.
Yeah.
The other problem you want to avoid is frustration, because it's too difficult and you can't make it. You can't do it. There is just this narrow band of optimal level of challenge which requires some effort, and that is actually part of the success of training. You need some effort. You cannot do it easily. But with some effort, you are successful. And then the program learns about your effort and your success and your speed and adjusts the next